All right, guys. So I have been watching some of this Darrell Brooks trial. All right. Now, this is by far one of the craziest trials I have ever seen. Uh, and that's not a good thing. This guy, um, I would, I'm at a loss for words to describe how oblivious this guy is to most things. Common sense, he doesn't have it. Uh, the idea that someone on a case like this would choose to represent themselves, they usually would have enough common sense to know if you don't have, you know, as some other attorneys have put it, an attorney with decades of experience, then don't do it. It is not to the benefit of you, especially if you don't have that experience. This guy is like so far out of his depth. All right. I mean, it is what it is. He is exercising his right to defend himself. He doesn't have to do this. That's the craziest part, is that this was his decision. So, and keep in mind also, I just started hearing about this recently, and I already know the verdict has already came out. So I'm kind of jumping on this at last minute. You know what I'm saying? The case is pretty much over with. The only thing left now is the sentencing phase, which that judge, y'all, I think she is going to light his ass up. You know what I'm saying? Um, I think what should happen, he should have to stay in the courtroom and he should have to listen to what the judge has to tell him. I don't think this is something that he should be allowed to miss the way he has most of the trial. All right. That shouldn't happen for the sentencing phase. He should have to be there and he should have to hear what the judge has to tell him. All right. Um, I hope that's what happens. I hope they, you know, tie him down and possibly put a gag order on him. You know what I'm saying? To keep him quiet. That's the only way this is going to work for the sentencing phase. That's probably what they're going to have to do to this guy. Like, I'm not even joking. If you guys haven't seen any of this, watch some of this stuff and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This guy is not going to respect anything. He has no respect for human life. He has no respect for law and order. He has no respect for nothing. He doesn't even have respect for himself. That's how far this guy is gone. All right. Personally, I don't understand how he passed the the mini trial to figure out if he was competent enough to defend himself, to represent himself in this case. I don't understand that. Because from what I've seen, um, his best defense would have been reason of insanity. All right. Now, One thing I want to clarify real quick, because I know I mentioned I watched some attorneys on here and they've been talking about it. I am not an attorney. I have no, aside from my own experience going through the judicial system, because I've been in some trouble before. So I know a little bit about the stuff that I've been through. So I have that. And I also have common sense. I also, watch actual attorneys break all this stuff down. Um, and so if I say or mention anything that you guys can go and find contrary evidence to it, perfectly fine. That's what this channel is for. If you notice this channel, it says researching with political. All right. Everyone in my audience is researching with me. We are all together looking for the facts. It's as simple as that. This is not one of those channels to where the audience is going to watch. They're going to say something and never get a reply. Never get any type of feedback whatsoever. You will get feedback if you post in my comment section. All right. If you have something negative you want to say about me, the channel, or anything like that, that's perfectly fine. But you could come with some respect. All right. Simple as that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to watch just a little bit of the opening statements. All right. Now, I've kind of skipped around on this. I went through and I found a brand new attorney, new to me anyways. All right. I watched Natalie Lawyer Chick. She is amazing. All right. And then I found this other channel. And she also, while I was watching her videos, she shouted out her channel. The Natalie Lawyer Chick. She shouted out her channel. She said she's going to be streaming later on today. That was at the time of watching that video. All right. So I'm going to put the links to both of those in the description. Go check them out. They have a lot more knowledge than I do. Which would also benefit me, because then I know if I say something wrong, then you guys can go and find other contrary information and say, nah, if you go to this video right here, go to this timestamp, and then you'll see what the facts are. Perfectly fine. If you want to do that, you're more than welcome to it, and then I'll correct the record as I do further videos. All right. So we're going to go ahead and watch some of the opening statements, just enough to get an idea about what has actually happened here. I'm going to tell y'all, I don't understand how a human being could have such disregard for human life that because you had a bad day, you're going to see other people who are happy and celebrating something. It makes no sense whatsoever. All right. I can't understand this. And the whole problem. All right.
We have the technology problem solved. So go ahead.
All right. Well, we're starting. So,
statement.
And the biggest problem here is that his demeanor in courtroom has actually hurt his case so bad, because it shows his lack of remorse, lack of empathy, lack of anything. All right. Because keeping in mind, he's playing two different parts, the defendant and the attorney. So it's kind of a hard balance for someone to do, all right, but he's making no effort whatsoever. All right. Now, I mean, his tactics are just so bad and horrendous that I don't understand how badly someone's brain can be gone. You know, Lewis Black made a reference that politicians think we are nothing more than meat with eyes. I think that is a accurate description of this person. I could It would be difficult for me to call him a human being. Oh, right. That's how bad this is. And what I was trying to get to though is his demeanor is so bad and atrocious that, you know, whatever little bit the jury is going to see and they're going to know that something is off, all right, it fits. It literally fits the description of the personality of a man who would intentionally run over crowds of people with his freaking car. Now, the judge is trying to keep that away from the jury as to not, you know, prejudice the jury. All right. But there's only so much she can keep from them. As the jury keeps having to go in and out of the courtroom because of disruptions, because of interruptions, like they're gonna know. All right. They are going to know. They may not see it firsthand, but I'm pretty sure they're gonna know and understand he is not cooperating. That's why they have to keep getting us out of the courtroom. Because he's being combative. All right. I don't understand it. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I always wonder though, as verdicts are being read and sentences are being read, how they manage to keep their composure. You know, I can see it being very difficult to maintain respect for the court when, you know, you're getting dealt harsh verdicts and sentences. So I can understand that. But most people, they also understand that if they make an outburst, they'll be escorted out of the courtroom and then they're just not going to know and get to hear the rest of the conversation. All right. They may end up getting to hear it from a computer. All right. I'm imagining that should still be an option, but you never know. Uh, all right. Let's go ahead and check out the opening statements now.
Thousands of people were bundling up and going downtown to watch the annual Waukesha Christmas Parade. The event started off normal. There were dance teams, high school marching bands, local community groups, local businesses, all making their way down the parade route. The streets were lined with friends and family members and neighbors, people there to soak up the atmosphere. Kids ran into the street to grab candy from people who were throwing it from the parades. It sounds corny, but I think you'll see from the videos, there was a true sense of joy in the air.
That he came
Darrell
along
Brooks
and
killed
ruined.
that joy. He replaced it with terror, trauma, and death.
And also bear in mind, not just for the day, all right, for the rest of these people's life. Has probably killed probably 80 to 90% of joy they might have felt from everything for the rest of their lives. And this guy, I heard him earlier talk about his bruises and his cuts and scrapes and all that kind of nonsense. And he's talking about the stuff that happened to him. That's, and I don't know if the jury heard that or not. I'm assuming probably not. I mean, look, that right there, like, I don't know if he realizes this or not. Um, he has done so much to kill his character completely. Like, if he would have came in and said, momentary, uh, you know, if he would have came in and pled, not guilty by reason of insanity, that would have been so much of a easier trial to get through. All right. If he would have done that, then obviously they wouldn't have allowed him to represent himself. He would have had an attorney. And I really don't understand why that wasn't the defense. Like, I don't know what the original defense was. This case, y'all, is like so freaking bizarre. All right, let's keep going.
The evidence is going to show that Mr. Brooks left behind a trail of carnage and chaos as he made his way down Main Street through the parade route. The evidence will show that he left that crime scene, created that crime scene, in fact, because he was fleeing from another one. One where he had laid his hands on a woman and where police involvement became inevitable.
Now, I don't
So
know
as
the
he
whole
careened
story.
down Main Street,
I don't.
swerving
I
from
know
curb to
the
curb,
very, just the
hands
basics,
glued
y'all.
to the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road in front of him with a silent rage on his face. He hit the gas with his red Ford Escape and used it as a battering ram over and over again, striking men, women, and kids. In the end, Mr. Brooks killed 6 people. He injured dozens more and left a permanent scar on this community. We are going to present evidence to you over the next several days in chronological phases, in order of events, from start to end. I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to lay out for you the table of contents to this story. We're going to set the scene with Sergeant Dave
This is why
Warner
we're
of
starting
the
here,
City of
because I
Waukesha
don't
Police
know the
Department.
whole story.
Sergeant Warner was the highest-ranking police official working at the parade that day. He was the incident commander for the Waukesha Christmas Parade, and we are going to, with Sergeant Warner's help, take you through this, which is the first of 3 maps that we will refer to repeatedly throughout this trial. This map depicts the area that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days, the parade route. Now, for those of you not entirely familiar with downtown Waukesha, this is going to look like a bunch of gibberish, but once we get going and we repeatedly refer to these street names and the business names and the groups that were involved in this.
Now, look, on a side note, I think in every city, they need to have at least a few squad cars that has the ability to have a rack that extends forward and lifts for police chases, for any time they have a suspect that they need to stop. They got to have that. And that is just a start. I think most squad cars should have that capability. All right. Especially for any squad cars that are going to be used for guarding parades, regarding any huge crowds, anything like that. Absolutely. They need to have those racks that I was talking about, possibly other gadgets to help, subdue vehicles. All right. I mean, the world that we're living in now is not the world we've been living in before. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. Um, I don't know what the situation is, but it seems like some of these people are just going nuts. You know what I'm saying? I think it has to have a lot to do with mental illness. You know what I'm saying? That's what I think, personally.
Gibberish, but once we get going and we repeatedly refer to these street names and the business names and the groups that were involved in this parade, I think it'll become like a second language to you. Sergeant Warner will describe for you how the parade route ran from.
And I know he's going to interrupt, like he has to.
Intersection of Main Street and White Rock Avenue. White Rock was
I think that's his job.
For the parade groups and floats. And they made their way southeast on White Rock until they came to Main Street, and then they would make a right turn and head southeast down Main Street through the parade route until the very end as it wraps around to the south and runs into Wisconsin Avenue. The parade route then would continue to the east, making a left-hand turn on Wisconsin, but nothing really happens on Wisconsin Avenue. You're not going to hear any testimony about that. As you can see from this map, it depicts or represents each intersection where a squad car or a police officer was stationed. They're denoted by the little badge shields in the intersections. If you look closely, you can see little red lines, and Sergeant Warner will describe how those represent the barricades that were placed at each intersection for security and safety purposes. Once we've got that established, we're going to move into the first chapter of this story, and you're going to hear about the origin of Mr. Brooks' rage that day. A violent domestic argument with Erica Patterson, his former girlfriend and the mother of his child. Erica Patterson is going to testify either today or tomorrow, hopefully today. She's going to tell you that in November of 2021, she was staying at the Women's Center, which is a shelter here in Waukesha. And on the day in question, November 21st of 2021, the defendant showed up in Waukesha in his red Ford Escape that she knew he drove, and he argued with her, and he harassed her, and he punched her in the face. And the thing about a swollen eye is it's tough to fake. You're going to hear evidence about how after, let me back up. You're going to hear evidence about how the defendant took Erica Patterson all over town that afternoon. From Frame Park, across the river, up Barstow Hill, back down to Frame Park. And at some point, after she was struck, after she sustained that injury, Erica called her friends because she needed help. And she had no one else to call. One of those friends is Corey Runkle. You're going to hear from Corey.
Guy's a freaking monster, y'all.
Corey's going to say that she was Erica's roommate at the Women's Center. She had known Erica for a few weeks and they had grown close. And when she got the call from Erica that Erica needed help, Corey immediately responded to help. And she ended up finding Erica and Darrell Brooks in front of the White Rock School. If we go back, the White Rock School is on White Rock Avenue. It's on near the top right portion of the map. It's just south of Frame Park. And Corey is going to talk about how she found Erica and the defendant at this location, and she got into both a physical and a verbal altercation with Mr. Brooks. That altercation is captured on surveillance video, 2 surveillance videos actually. You're going to see both of them. You're going to see how the defendant was reacting that day. You're going to see what he looked like, what he was wearing, the red Ford Escape that he was driving, you're going to see how the defendant reacted once Erica's friends showed up and he lost his physical advantage over a woman. Erica and Corey will also testify that at some point during this scuffle, the police were called. And you're going to see a separate video, squad video, from the responding officer that shows just down the block there was a marked squad car with its lights flashing, marking the entrance to the parade. Something that people in front of White Rock School would have seen. So the evidence is going to show that the defendant must have known. Once things got loud, and once there was more than just him and Erica on scene, the police were going to show up. So he took the coward's way out. You're going to see him in the video get into the driver's seat of that red SUV. Corey and Erica will tell you that no one else was in the car. And you're going to see him pull off on White Rock towards Main Street. You're going to hear from law enforcement officers
So that was the start
along
of
the
it.
parade route. The officers who made their initial contact with the defendant, the first ones who tried to stop him. And the first one is Detective Tom Casey, the lead detective in this case. He's sitting at the state's prosecution table right behind me. He's going to tell you that he was working that day as security for the parade. He was working at Main and White Rock. He's the first law enforcement officer to come into contact with the defendant during this incident, face to face. Or I think better describe it as face to windshield. He tried to stop the defendant, but there's only so much a man can do against an SUV. But he's going to tell you that he got so close, he got such a good look at Darrell Brooks' face that from that witness stand, he'll be able to say to you definitively, Darrell Brooks, the man in orange on the video screen, is the man who was driving the red SUV in this case. You're going to hear from a few more officers. Officer Bryce Butcher and Officer Sonia Schneider. They were positioned at the intersection of Main Street and East Avenue, just a little bit further southwest in that map. You're going to hear them describe how they saw this red SUV approaching. They quickly realized it was not part of the parade. They quickly realized this was a problem. There are people, children, in the street, lining the street. And so they jumped into action. They tried to stop it. As the SUV started barreling towards them, Officer Butcher, again, tried to get in the way. He put himself at risk trying to get in front of the vehicle. Couldn't stop it. Officer Schneider tried to redirect the vehicle up Buckley Street, making a right-hand turn. She'll tell you, and you'll see in the video, there was room. There was space. She couldn't do it. The defendant blew past her. And that's when the screams in the police radio start. You're going to hear from Jim Hawkinson, a battalion chief for the Waukesha Fire Department. He's going to tell you about the massive scope of the emergency.
So, in other words, if these squad cars had the ability to have a rack that could have lifted his back tires off the ground or anything like that at all, they might have been able to stop this before he got that far. It might have been possible. They got to do that, y'all. You know what I'm saying?
Fire Department. He's going to tell you about the massive scope of the emergency response to this tragedy. He was in charge of the fire department that day. He's going to tell you about all of the units that had to respond to the scene. The massive amount of resources needed to triage and treat and transport all the victims. He's going to tell you about the response from other communities in southeast Wisconsin, the mutual aid call that went out, and all the other communities that came to help out. He's going to tell you about how Waukesha Memorial Hospital, just up the hill from the parade route, quickly reached capacity, and so everybody had to be diverted to other medical facilities. We'll transition then into the next chapter of this story, and you're going to hear from some of the people whose lives were forever changed by the defendant's terrible decisions that day. But I'll tell you right now, you're not going to hear from all of them. It wouldn't make sense. It's not necessary. We
It's also
intend
not
to
feasible.
present the evidence to you in an efficient and streamlined way. We will
Right.
elicit testimony and introduce exhibits that cover every element of every single criminal charge in this case. But our goal is to avoid duplication of evidence and to avoid undue hardship on the victims and the witnesses who have already suffered so much. So the first witness in this part of the trial that you're going to hear from is Nicole White. She's the very first person, aside from Detective Casey, who was struck by the defendant on that day. She's going to tell you, as we look at this second of the three maps that we're going to repeatedly refer to, that she was marching with her co-workers and friends with Remax. You'll recognize the float, I think, in the videos, because just like the commercials for Remax, there's a giant hot air balloon that shoots fire out of the basket, which is pretty cool. And she's going to tell you she was marching with her friends and her co-workers when, without any warning, she was hit from behind and knocked over. You're going to see video of that. Nicole White has a special significance in this case because, as the first person who was struck, she represents the point in time when Mr. Brooks was legally required to stop. You heard the judge read the hit and run jury instructions, and to summarize, in Wisconsin, anybody who's operating a motor vehicle who's involved in some kind of accident, they have a duty to stop, to investigate, to exchange information. Not only did Darrell Brooks not stop,
Right.
the evidence will show that he sped up. The evidence will show
Because he was running from the
that as
police.
his body count increased, so did his motive to get away.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know he was actually running from the
Nicole
police.
White,
I didn't know it
think,
was
is
a
good
police chase.
point here for me to explain to you, or to summarize for you, the charge of first-degree recklessly endangering safety. Now, again, the judge read the law to you all morning and a lot of the afternoon, and she's going to read it to you again at the end of the case, and you're going to have a binder with all these instructions written down for you, so you do not need to memorize them, okay? But we're going to talk about first-degree recklessly endangering safety. It's a crime where it's committed by someone who recklessly endangers the safety of another human being under circumstances that show utter disregard for human life. Let's talk about what the state's not required to prove with recklessly endangering safety. Not required to prove injury. This was a conscious decision in our charging decision. We're not going to get into medical records. We're not going to talk about the details of witnesses' injuries because it's not relevant, except to the extent that it proves that they were.
All right, y'all. So here's what doesn't make sense to me. All right. If he had not ran, all right, at all, yes, he would have done some time for the assault and battery. All right. At most, he might have gotten like, what, 6 months? Like at the max for just the assault. He might not even have gotten that much. All right. The rest of his life is over now. Like, done. You know what I'm saying? Completely done. Because of the decisions he made that day. All right. It doesn't make sense, y'all.
Injuries because it's not relevant, except to the extent that it proves that they were endangered and resulted in injury. But we don't need to get into who was hit or how hard or how long they've suffered. We just are going to prove to you that their safety was endangered. So, after Nicole White, we are going to talk, you're going to hear evidence about the first of the larger groups that was affected by this incident, the Waukesha South High School marching band. 10 kids in that band got either hit or run over. Here's the first example of our efficient presentation of evidence. You're not going to hear
Why,
any one.
bro?
High school age
Right?
kids, there's video showing each and every one of them getting run over. So instead, you're going to hear from their band director, Sarah Waymeyer Aparicio. She's going to come in and she's going to look at some still shots of the video. She's going to identify each of the 10 kids for you. You're then going to watch and listen to the video, and it'll be clear as day who's getting run over or hit. It'll be clear as day whose safety was endangered by Mr. Brooks that day. As we move further down the parade route, you'll hear evidence about the Burris Logistics Group. You'll hear testimony from Kelly Grabo about how she was marching with that group along with her young daughter. You'll see video of them. They're dressed up like the Who's from Whoville. You'll see them get hit. As we move further down the parade route, you'll hear testimony about the Green family. They're spectators along the parade route. Charles Green is going to come in and talk about how he was there with his family. He was sitting on the southeast corner of Main and Gasper across the street from Martha Merrill's Books. He'll talk about how his kids were seated on a portable bench, something that you bring to a parade to sit on, and how they got knocked off that bench when the defendant ran into them. The next point in the presentation of evidence will involve the Waukesha Blazers. I think it's important to point out you can't consider this evidence of each crime in a vacuum. You need to consider the entire incident. Because at this point, by the time we get to the Blazers, the defendant will have already hit or run over 15 people. You'll see in the video that at this point the defendant has actually increased his speed, and you'll hear from Detective Mike Carpenter with the Waukesha Police Department. He's going to come in and talk about speed analysis. He'll tell you that he's certified to use a software program that basically takes surveillance video, measures the amount of time it takes to travel a certain distance in that video, and calculates an average speed over that distance. And he'll tell you that in video obtained from Bosco's Social Club, which is right in front of where the Blazers got hit, he'll tell you that that video in that area right before the Blazers got hit, the defendant was traveling in excess of 33 miles an hour. There were 5 victims in the Blazers. That includes Jackson Sparks, who was walking with his big brother Tucker. Cut down in the road before he had a chance to put any miles on his soul, Jackson was 8. He died 2 days later in the hospital. I think this is a good point to talk about the law of first-degree intentional homicide. Again, the judge provided the law to you. It'll be provided to you again at the conclusion of the trial. I want you to take a look at that second element. I don't know what the defense in this case is going to be. In fact, the defendant isn't required to put one on at all. He can sit there and not say a word throughout this trial, and that's perfectly within his right, and you can't hold that against him. And in fact, if he does that and we don't prove each and every one of these counts to you beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find him not guilty. That's the law. But if he does choose to present a defense, if he does raise any issues, I expect that he will likely claim that he didn't mean to kill these people. Take a look at that second bullet point. Keep that in mind as you're watching these videos, as you're learning about how this parade unfolded. Consider whether the defendant was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being.
Undeniable. You know what I'm saying?
We'll move further down the parade route,
Undeniable.
and the next group after the Blazers is the Extreme Dance Group. There were girls of really all ages in this group, from toddlers being pulled in strollers up to high school age teenage dancers. 15 victims, 15 people associated with this group either got hit or were very close to getting hit. That doesn't include 2 additional spectators who were watching the parade from the south side of Main Street near the 5 Points intersection, right in front of the extreme dance team as the defendant drove through. Girls in this dance group suffered catastrophic injuries. The group of victims also includes parents, grandparents, siblings, people marching with the group, but not necessarily as dancers. You're not going to hear from everybody who got hit. You're going to hear from the 2 instructors, the 2 young ladies who were tasked with teaching these girls these routines and marching with them and encouraging them and comforting them after the fact. And they're going to, in the video, identify for you where all these girls are positioned, and it'll be very clear the path of travel of the vehicle as it goes through that group of young ladies, who was hit and who was nearly hit. The next group down the parade route is Citizens Bank, and here we reach the second count of intentional homicide. Jane Kulik was marching with Citizens Bank with her friends, with her co-workers. This is the only count of homicide for which there is no clear video depicting how she died. So instead of watching video, you're going to hear evidence from her co-worker and from the man who was driving the truck pulling this float. And they're really the ones who are in the best position to observe exactly what happened to Jane Kulik as the defendant plowed through that parade route. And they're going to describe for you how she was struck, how she was run over. A medical examiner will explain that Jane Kulik's cause of death was multiple blunt force traumatic injuries. We'll move further down southwest along the parade route, and we'll learn about a group that was standing in front of the steaming cup, spectators again. Innocent people have nothing to do with anything. You're going to hear about 3 kids who were standing along with a bunch of others along the curb in front of steaming cup, and as the defendant swerved from the left side of the street as he hit Jane back to the right side of the street as he was avoiding the vehicle that was ahead of him, clipped the curb and hit these 3 kids. Then we're going to move in to the next group in the parade route, which is the Dancing Grannies. This is the deadliest point in the parade. 7 people in this group were struck. 4 of them died. You're going to hear from witnesses, members of the Dancing Grannies group, who will come in and they will describe being completely caught off guard. They will describe seeing pom-poms in the air, and the next thing they knew, there were bodies on the ground before the pom-poms hit the ground. You will learn about Bill Hospital, who was marching in a support capacity. He was there to support his wife Lola and their friends, the rest of the Dancing Grannies, just walking along the parade route trying to be helpful. And as the defendant swerved around the Dancing Grannies vehicle, which is a white SUV, you'll see it in the video, swerved around the right side, he hits Bill. And the medical examiner is going to tell you that Bill Hospital cause of death was multiple blunt force traumatic injuries. You'll learn about Tamara Durand, marching with the Grannies. This is her first parade. You'll see a diagram of where she was positioned. You'll see video of her getting struck. The medical examiner will tell you that Tamara Durand, cause of death, multiple blunt force traumatic injuries. You'll hear about Lee Owen, another Dancing Granny, positioned right next to Tamara, who had just begun one of her favorite routines, walking in a winter wonderland, when she got hit. You'll learn about Jenny Sorensen, You'll learn that Ginny was walking at the front of the group carrying the banner. You'll learn that Ginny was normally a coach for the group.
All right, y'all. Um, I think we're going to leave it here for right now. All right. We're definitely going to come back once they go and do the sentencing phase. All right. Uh, I will probably, you know, do a reaction to quite a bit of that. I'm expecting quite a bit of sparks to be flying. Um, and like I said, I hope he is forced to hear that judge when she gives her a sentence. We already know pretty much what it's going to be. All right. Life without parole. There's really no possible way to give him anything less. All right. Um, I mean, there's going to be some really big numbers. All right. Coming out of that. I mean, we're probably going to be looking at 20 years, 70 years, 80 years. All in all, it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, he's never getting out of prison. Okay? He's going to serve the rest of his life. All right? And as well, like, that's where he should be after doing something like this. That's where he belongs. All right? I I cannot get over how I understand the mindset of someone when they're fixated on getting away from the police. All right. But how far are you really willing to go for anyone that's ever tried to run from the police? Like, there has to be a line that you're just like, okay, fine, that's it. I'm just going to pull over and stop. I don't understand why that mentality isn't there. Like, they have no earthly idea that if they would voluntarily stop, even during the chase, if they would just voluntarily stop, that would help them so much. Like, tremendously. Because when they go to court, then they can then say, eventually, I realized that my actions could end up causing death or great bodily harm. And so I came to my senses and I stopped. They would have so much respect for that individual if they had stopped willingly. Do you understand that? That person would have an upper hand, an advantage going into court for whatever it was. Not saying they're going to overlook the fact that he ran in the first place. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying, though, he would have some legal ground to stand on because of the fact that he stopped willingly. All right. He can then legitimately say, I had a momentary lapse of reason. You know, I got flustered. I wasn't thinking. The only thing I was thinking about was not going to jail. And at that moment, I was just fixated on getting away. But I came to my senses and I realized that I could not put myself in a position to risk the lives of others for my benefit. I think that is something that more and more, uh, as society, that should be the standard. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you would just stop, a lot of your charges would just go away. They would just completely vanish. I think that should be the standard. I know it's not right now, and I don't think it is, but that should be the standard, in my opinion. That would then encourage people to to stop trying to run, to stop endangering the lives of others, as this individual did right here. You know what I'm saying? Uh, I think that needs to be the standard. That needs to be the message going forward. If you just stop, realize what you're doing is endangering the lives of others for your personal benefit, that is a selfish and cowardly act. Um, when you get caught doing something wrong, you need to face the music. All right. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be driving. You shouldn't be, you know, and this is a good message for all the parents who has young teens, who has anybody, especially ones who is prone to having conflicts with law enforcement. I think if you're a parent, you have an obligation to teach them about how the law works. Teach them how they need to conduct themselves with law enforcement when and if they get into trouble. Because like I said, especially if they have a history with it, as time goes on, the more and more they have issues with law enforcement, the more likely they're eventually going to start trying to run. Before that happens, you as a parent needs to start having these conversations. It is never okay to try and run from law enforcement. You will not get away. It is not going to work. Even if you're successful at evading police, there's another side of that that isn't addressed enough. All right. And that is, they probably know and can find out exactly who you are. Okay. So even if you escape the chase, there's still a high likelihood they could track you down later on. And then you're still going to have to answer for that. And yes, they can still put you on trial for that felony of fleeing. And all the charges you would have gotten from that, endangering public safety, any road violations, all that stuff adds up. You know what I'm saying? So it's not worth it. It is not worth it. I mean, you just think about this. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to blow through stop signs, traffic lights, and you're going to be endangering a lot of people. A lot of them. That's a lot of charges that you're going to be acquiring. At least in my opinion, is what it could boil down to, especially if it's a long chase. I watched a really long police chase. And by the time it was over, they said this guy has probably got a 20-year sentence out of this, is what he's going to get, because of all the individual charges. All right. I could probably describe part of it. Some of you guys might know exactly which one I'm talking about. I don't remember the names or anything like that. I know he was going down the highway and got on the wrong side of the highway. All right. And he was also, they said it looked like he was striking his passenger. And so that was why they said, you know, we can't we can't stop this chase. We have to stop this vehicle. Um, because they were afraid for her safety, is what it boiled down to. So they was like, if we let this car go, um, it's not going to end well for her. All right, because she was a hostage. I don't know what her condition was after that. The only thing I do know is that she was rescued from the car. Um, I think she might have been unconscious at the time they rescued her, but I don't know for sure because it's been a little bit since I watched that. All right. Um, you know, one thing I've said before, um, I think in schools, once you get up to probably high school, throughout high school, they should be teaching them about criminal law, specifically about driving laws, minor infractions, things like that, the basics, so that they have a basic understanding of how the criminal justice system works. Because they should understand that a good number of these teenagers are going to go out into the world and they're going to get in trouble. And if they have previous knowledge of how the system works, they could potentially not get in trouble. And if they do get into trouble, they would have better knowledge and understanding of how they need to conduct themselves to not make it worse. Like there was one where so many people run because of minor infractions where they would have gotten only a ticket, and they try and run because they think they're going to go to jail. And it's like, you're guaranteed the fact that you're going to go to jail when you run from the police. You've almost certainly written that into stone at that moment. So that's why when you get caught, pull your car over and deal with it head on. Don't sit there and try and run. It is not going to end well for you. The other thing is the bail jumping. They talked about that too. That this suspect also did that. He also got out on bail apparently, and he just ran. He tried to get away. From my understanding, I could be wrong. I don't know the whole story. All I know is that one of the charges that he's got is bail jumping. I'm pretty sure that's what it means. That he got out on bail, and then he was supposed to show up for court, and of course, he didn't show up. Bail jumping. All right. Had he not got caught, all right, say he fled the country and was just gone. This is a conversation that needs to be had. People need to understand what that means if you're going to attempt something like this. Especially if you're going to stay in the same country. If you're just like, I'll just hide out and not, make my presence known. All right. Your life is basically over with at that point. You can't see your family. You can't get mail. You can't do anything without getting caught. So that's what I said. Your life is basically over. You have no social life anymore. Your entire demographics, your entire everything that you were, everything, that's all gone until you get caught. So once you start to realize that, like, wait a minute, I can't see my family anymore. Uh, because if you do, they're obviously going to be talking to your family. Obviously. They're obviously going to be, watching. Because that's the first place they're going to be checking. All right. So you can't do that unless you want to get caught. And so once that starts to sink in, and then it's kind of like the situation comes up to where you start to realize my whole purpose of not getting caught has defeated the purpose now, because now I have no life. My family's gone. You know, I can't go to the movies. I can't really do anything because I don't want to be seen in public. Uh, it's all gone. You know what I'm saying? And how are you going to make money? How are you going to survive? You can't apply for any government assistance. They're going to find you then. You can't get a job because then they'll find you. It does not make any sense whatsoever. This is one of the things that needs to be taught in schools. That's what I believe. All the teenagers especially, they need to understand and fully appreciate this, so that they understand if they ever get out on bail or whatever else, they know it ain't gonna work out if you're just like, oh, I'll just take off and run. I'll go on the run. Can't do that. Cannot. Unless you're willing to kiss everything goodbye completely and start over, you gotta get a fake you gotta get a brand new identity, you gotta do all these other things. Can't do it. You know what I'm saying? For the average person, no. Definitely not. Eventually, you will find out, and you will have to come to appreciate the fact you have to turn yourself in, or you have to get caught. That's your only options. That's it. So, as soon as you try and contact your family, you're done. You're done at that point. Um, and I tell you, if anyone is ever at that position, turn yourself in. Do not make it harder than it has to be. Um, you can fight that battle in court, but don't fight that battle on the street. That is not where you need to be. All right. The longer you stay hidden, the worse it's going to be when they finally do catch you. I mean, it's not worth it. It's really not, y'all. Um, we need to encourage playing by the book. All right. More shows like this need to exist. And that's what I'm here for. All right. Um, more and more people need to understand how the law works and what they need to do to be at least somewhat a productive member of society, at least somewhat. There's a certain point that you cannot go past. Once you do, you have no other options or no other recourse at that moment. Like, you guys need to grasp and understand this. It doesn't matter if he wakes up in 20 years and he has the most remorse in the world. It doesn't matter how much remorse he might have in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. It doesn't matter. He has no possibility I'm pretty sure he's going to have no possibility. I will be really surprised. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't imagine any world whatsoever where a person who's committed this type of crime could get possibility of parole. And even 300 years. You know what I'm saying? That would even be a stretch. I could be wrong, but I am 99.9% sure he's going to get life without the possibility of parole ever. Never. Um, the best thing that he could ever hope for is a new trial. Which really, that alone, let's say there is a 0.5% chance of that existing. And that's being generous. All right. I don't think he's ever going to get another day in court. Like, this is it. And I think we really need to appreciate and understand the gravity of that. Like, this is it. There's no other options. Probably. Like, it's doubtful he will ever get another day in court besides what he's having right now or what he's just had. Um, and he's wasted it. That's the sad thing about it, is that he's wasted it. He threw it completely away. He had an opportunity to have an actual attorney represent him and get an actual defense. And what he's done to himself is he shot himself in the foot, and his legs and everything. He's just kept shooting himself in the legs and feet over and over. And one final thing I got to point out here. One final thing that we got to address. The temperament of this judge. It's like yin yang. That's what this is. It's so bizarre that the pairing of the judge and the pairing of this defendant in particular are so bizarre, right? Because usually any other judge I've ever seen would not put up with this bull for one single second. He would have spent the entire trial in the other courtroom on mute. I bet you. At least 99% of it. The judge would not have given him even 1% of what this judge gave him. Explaining the law, explaining the procedures and how things work. I mean, she's went above and beyond what a typical judge would do. Setting all that aside, her willingness to allow this defendant to treat her and the court with such high disrespect and not enforce law and order. I don't understand it. That's why I said any other judge, he would have been thrown out of that courtroom immediately. And they may have called and spoke to him every once in a while to say, do you want to come back and participate in this trial? And then if they get one response that isn't a response to that question, that would have been it. Like, nope. If he decides he wants to cooperate, then fine. I mean, how much can they really do? I don't get it, y'all. I don't. I think, really, I think this judge should have stepped down and they should have let another judge come in. Um, One that would have been better prepared to deal with an individual like this. Because she wasn't. Now, the other attorneys I was watching, that she said, I think she's just being careful because she knows this is going to go to appeal because he's probably going to get convicted and this is going to go straight to appeal. And what I think happened, or what she was saying, she was like, I want to make sure our bases are covered so that they're not going to get a new trial because of him not understanding the law and the procedures, which wouldn't have happened anyways. All right. That's the risk you take when you try and defend yourself or represent yourself. That's the risk you take. If you don't know what you're doing, then don't do it. Even if you know what you're doing, as this other YouTuber who's also a lawyer, which I'll have her, it's not Natalie, but it's another one, and I don't remember her name right now because I just started watching her channel. But just know it's the other one. All right. She said that even she has attorneys. All right. Because she doesn't want to do all the work herself if she ever has any legal troubles. And that's the thing. It's not even just like, let's say you knew the law like the back of your hand. All right. Let's just imagine that for a second, which is completely unrealistic, especially for an average citizen. But let's just assume that someone had a family member, let's say, that was an actual attorney, and let's say he learned from them for years, and so they know all the procedures, they know everything about the law. What they don't have is really good access. Your attorneys are going to have better access to, do their investigations or to, look for additional evidence that can help prove your innocence. They're going to have better access to that type of information that you're just simply not going to have. So they're going to have more hands-on experience. And that was the other thing that this other YouTuber was talking about. She was like, he doesn't have any hands-on experience. All right, y'all. So I think that sums it up for now. So y'all put in the comments. Let me know what y'all think. Let me know if there's any other cases you want me to look into. All right. All right. I will see y'all in the next video. Till then, I'm out.